Hello, and welcome to another episode of Connect, the show where we explore solutions for loneliness, foster connections, and promote healthy aging in Massachusetts. I'm Sandra Harris, co-leader of the Massachusetts Coalition to Build Community and End Loneliness. We're excited to have you join us today. June marks Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month, a time dedicated to raising awareness about a disease that affects millions of individuals and families worldwide. While Alzheimer's is commonly associated with memory loss, it involves much more. It's a journey that impacts relationships, independence, and daily life. Today on Connect, we will explore the early warning signs of dementia, the steps to take if you're concerned about a loved one, and the critical importance of early diagnosis. We will also discuss the stigma surrounding Alzheimer's and hear from a brave individual living with early stage Alzheimer's disease about his experience. Additionally, we will provide resource and hope because no one should face this journey alone. Joining us in studio today is Nicole McGurin, a dedicated advocate and expert in Alzheimer's care and support, who serves as the program and service director at the Massachusetts, New Hampshire chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. We're honored to have her here to share her insights and expertise. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you, Sandra, for having me.
Nicole, to begin, tell us about your role at the Alzheimer's Association and what motivated you to this position.
Sure. The Alzheimer's Association is the world's largest voluntary health organization devoted to research, care, and support and public policy for people living with Alzheimer's and their caregivers. And my role at the Alzheimer's Association is to lead a very talented group of staff and volunteers who provide support, information, and guidance to people living with Alzheimer's and other dementia and their caregivers, and also to provide education on early detection, Alzheimer's, brain health, and caregiving to the residents of Massachusetts and New Hampshire. I feel really fortunate to have this role at the Alzheimer's Association. I've been in this field for a long time. I started as a nurse's aide in a nursing home when I was in high school and in college, and saw firsthand what dementia does to families. And I was really inspired to make that my career, and I've been fortunate to be able to do that. And to find a place where I can work, where I can use my experience with direct care to help caregivers with their concerns, but also to play a role in bringing change to benefit people living with Alzheimer's and dementia and their caregivers is really fortunate.
Oh, wonderful, Nicole. Thank you. We're so lucky to have you working with us in the Alzheimer's Association. What is the difference between Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia?
I'm so happy you asked that question. That is probably the most common question that I've gotten in all my years of working at the Alzheimer's Association. There's a lot of confusion around that. So dementia is an umbrella term for a group of symptoms that affect our cognitive functioning. So things like problems with memory, problems with thinking, and changes in behavior. And there are different causes to those symptoms. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of those symptoms. It accounts for 60 to 80% of all cases of dementia. But there are other causes like Parkinson's disease, vascular disease, frontotemporal dementia that cause very similar symptoms. They all do cause some actual changes to the biology of our brains. They are not a part of normal aging. They are a disease. I think it's also important to remember that not all cognitive decline is dementia. Some cognitive decline is caused by reversible things like having thyroid imbalances or vitamin deficiencies or things like depression. But unfortunately, there are cases where these symptoms are progressive, like with Alzheimer's disease and these other types of dementia.
Now that we understand the different types, how are they diagnosed, and at what stages can you determine which type of dementia is being diagnosed?
So a diagnosis of Alzheimer's and other dementia, it's not one single test. It's a combination of tests, including a physical exam, a neurological exam, usually looking at some biomarkers that could be looking at spinal fluid or maybe doing a PET scan analysis, as well as doing a neuropsychological exam or an exam to see how your brain is functioning. And doctors look at that and also take into consideration your medical history to make a determination of what type of dementia you have.
So what are some of the early signs that people need to look out for?
So the Alzheimer's Association's developed a list of 10 warning signs that give families an idea of whether there's something to be worried about. And the first thing on that list is, I think, the one that people are most familiar with, which is memory loss. And generally that's short-term memory loss. So things that you recently learned, what you had for breakfast, those kinds of things. But it also includes symptoms like trouble with complex thinking, trouble planning your day, changes in your ability to communicate, changes in your mood and behavior. There are even sometimes people will experience changes in their visual spatial awareness, so have trouble judging distances and things like that. It's important when you're thinking about these warning signs to think about, are these different than how somebody usually functions? We all know people who have always been forgetful, and maybe they're just the same amount of forgetful. And are they getting worse over time? And are they serious enough that they're impacting someone's quality of life and functioning? And if that is the case, then it is important to, begin by talking to your primary care physician to get a sense of whether these changes are something we'd expect with aging or are they not, and to determine whether it's necessary to see a specialist.
So if someone notices memory changes in a loved one, what should they do next?
Well, I think the first thing to do, if we've considered they've already looked to see what are these warning signs, is to do a little bit of detective work. To think about, is there anything else going on that might explain the changes that they are seeing? Seeing whether others are noticing those signs, particularly if you're living from a distance. And if you do a little detective work and think, well, there is reason to be worried, then the next step is to plan a conversation with your loved one. And the purpose of that conversation is not to convince them that you might have Alzheimer's or dementia, but it's really to convince them that we should talk to a doctor about the changes that we are seeing. And that's a tricky conversation to have. We live in a society where we're very private about our medical concerns. And so it's definitely important to plan that conversation, think about who's the best person to have it, what are you going to say, to plan a good time to have that conversation. And if you've had that conversation and someone agrees to have that appointment, is to help them to make that appointment and see the primary care physician.
What role is the primary care physician at this point?
For most people, again, that usually is the first step, when you're worried. And the primary care physician can do some very basic, cognitive testing to see, does there seem to be some kind of changes that are worrying? They can also do some simple testing to rule out other causes for those changes. They can check vitamin levels. They can look to see if you are having any side effects from medication and things like that. If they do all of that and there's still concern, then most primary care physicians will refer you to a specialist. Most often that would be a neurologist or maybe a geriatric psychiatrist, or sometimes a clinic that has multiple disciplines for further testing.
So why is early detection so important for both the individual being diagnosed as well as the family?
It's very, very important. I mean, first of all, of course, if something was treatable, we'd want to treat it. And if you just assume what's happening is normal aging, you might be living with some symptoms that you don't need to have. But even if that diagnosis does turn out to be Alzheimer's or another type of dementia, first of all, we now have some treatments available for Alzheimer's disease, and they have been approved and they work in people in the early stages. So you would need to have that diagnosis early. Early diagnosis also gives people the opportunity to plan for the future, to put important legal and financial plans in place, so that they can make sure that they get the care they need in the future and that they have a voice in what that care is. And it gives the opportunity to participate in research if people are interested in that. And then I would say too, just kind of on an emotional level, most people have a sense something is going on, and to get an answer for what that is, even if it's something you don't want to hear, can be reassuring to know that it's not your fault that you're struggling, that there really is a disease that's happening.
Okay, so can early prevention or intervention slow the progression of the disease or improve the quality of life?
Well, I would say that, early detection definitely can improve the quality of life, and I would say affords the opportunity for treatments. So we are now in a place where we have 2 drugs that have been approved by the FDA that do slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease. They do that by breaking down some of the protein that builds up in the brains of people living with Alzheimer's disease. And again, that is something that you need to have an official diagnosis, and you need to be in the early stages to take advantage of. We also now have some medications that treat some of the cognitive symptoms and psychological symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. And there are so many more drugs in the pipeline that are looking at different targets to slow progression. So there's a lot of hope in that area. And I would be remiss if I don't mention too that there are non-medical interventions that people can take advantage of. Support groups, memory cafes to meet other people, education programs to learn about how to manage your symptoms, or for caregivers how to improve their care. So there's all of these different opportunities available if you know what you're dealing with.
Okay, good. Very good. So many caregivers and individuals living with dementia face stigma, right? As a long-distance caregiver, my mom has Alzheimer's disease. I understand and I know and have seen firsthand how that works. What are some of the common misconceptions about Alzheimer's?
Yeah, there are quite a few of them, I would say. I did mention one already, which is that Alzheimer's is a part of normal aging. It is not a part of normal aging. It is actually a disease that has some treatments available for it, and that is not something someone can control. Another key one is that to keep in mind is that Alzheimer's is more than just memory loss. It is other symptoms like changes in behavior, personality, communication. And I think that misconception that Alzheimer's is just memory loss really minimizes the challenges that caregivers like you and your sister face, and the challenges that the gentleman will get a chance to hear from in a little bit when he talks about his experience. It minimizes those challenges by thinking it's just memory loss. The other thing I would mention that it contributes to the stigma is, that Alzheimer's is just something that affects people who are older. And unfortunately, there are, it's a small number compared to the large number of people living with dementia, but about 200,000 Americans live with younger onset dementia in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And that misconception that it has to be someone older often for them leads to misdiagnosis, years of struggling to maybe maintain a job when they really have a disease that's going on as well.
We know that loneliness and social isolation can have a critical, significant impact on those living with dementia, as well as their caregivers. How can the community better support? How can we as neighbors support each other? What can the community do?
I think on a personal level, if you are a neighbor, as you just said, I love thinking of it that way. I think the most important thing that you can do is get yourself educated about what Alzheimer's and dementia are, so you're not afraid of that. And then with the people that you know in your life who are affected by it, to continue to be involved in their life, to invite them to parties, to visit them, to talk with them, and not contribute to that isolation. And I think with some education about maybe how to change your communication style and things like that, you can feel comfortable to do that. And as communities, I think we need to do what we can to provide support groups, to make sure that people who work in fields that are working with people with dementia, like first responders and doctors, are educated about Alzheimer's and dementia, and to do what we can to make public spaces more dementia friendly. Have things like quiet areas people can go to. Make sure there's very clear signage for people. Have bathrooms where it's okay for a caregiver to go in with a loved one to give them a hand, so that's not a big deal and an embarrassing thing.
Oh, that's also important. What resources does the Alzheimer's Association provide the individuals and their families, and how can they get to these resources? How do they contact you?
Well, the Alzheimer's Association has lots of support and guidance available for people living with dementia, for their caregivers, and even the general public who have questions. At the heart of what we do is our 24/7 helpline, and it is what I am most proud of working at the Alzheimer's Association, is having this particular service, which gives people access to a live professional anytime, day or night, to assist with some of the simpler questions. Maybe they're looking for a name of a neurologist, to complicated questions like, is my mom safe to drive anymore? Or is it time to look at a nursing home? And even just to provide general support to people. Sometimes a caregiver, maybe they had a rough day and someone's finally asleep that they're caring for at 2 a.m. and they want to talk through how their day went. We're there for all of that in more than 200 languages. So that is just a wonderful thing that I urge people to take advantage of. In your community, we offer support groups for both caregivers and people living with dementia, as well as lots and lots of education programs on early detection, brain health, as well as helping caregivers with skills that they need. And all of this is provided to people at no charge to them, and there's no application process or eligibility criteria. You simply need to reach out to our helpline, which is 800-272-3900, or visit our website, alz.org, for information on all these services and to get started.
Is that a national hotline or is that statewide?
Yes, so the 24/7 helpline is nationwide, so anyone across the country can call us and they can get connected locally with what's happening in their community.
Understanding Alzheimer's from a personal perspective is crucial. Today we have the privilege of hearing from someone living with dementia, and for this we turn to our field reporter, Melissa Donegan, who spoke with Dan Hogan about his journey. Let's listen to their conversation. Melissa?
Thank you, Sandra. Today I am joined with Dan Hogan. Dan has his PhD in psychology and a JD in law, both from Harvard University. His career path has covered much ground. He's been a Harvard faculty member and also a management consultant. His final job was as executive director of Club Passam, the iconic folk music venue in Harvard Square, where he is still a senior advisor. Dan resides with Jane Lawson, his life partner, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he has lived or worked for some part of each decade since the 1960s. He has 3 grown children whom he loves dearly and whom he spends as much time as possible. Dan still plays tournament squash at a national level and recreational tennis at a club level. In addition, he's a die-hard 60s folk singer and enjoys singing and playing guitar with Jane. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. And Dan is also an early stage advocate with the Alzheimer's Association. So Dan, to get us started, can you describe the first symptoms that you experienced that made you worried that you might have an issue with your cognition?
Yeah, that goes way back, actually, Melissa, to 2010 or so, when I was 67 at the time, and I became aware of that I was starting to forget the names of people. When it became harder to learn and remember lyrics to new songs, I could remember the 60s songs, but not current songs. And people's names would just sometimes I'd forget.
So can you share the story about how you received your official diagnosis of Alzheimer's?
That was a very torturous path, but in 2012, I had a full neuropsych exam. Um, and that indicated, the doctor said that everything was sort of normal aging and not to be worried. But I remained worried, but I didn't do anything about it for another 10 years. 2022, I had a second neuropsych exam. And this time the doctor said I definitely had mild cognitive impairment, but I definitely also did not have any form of dementia or Alzheimer's. So then in 2023, in January, I was playing in a state squash tournament, and I came in after a game. My opponent, a young kid, 12 and a half years old, who beat me, came up to me and he said, "Nice match, Mr. Hogan." I said, "What do you mean, nice match? We just played the first game." He said, "No, Mr. Hogan, I beat you 3-0." and I had no memory of most of that match, and that was a real sort of clarion call and got me the ability to have a full neuropsych exam.
So, what was your initial reaction to the diagnosis, and how has that kind of changed over time for you?
So it really was a life-changing moment. It came on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock,
Wow.
May 5th. I remember it well.
Yeah.
When I received notification from MGH that there was a test result, and I thought, oh, there must be a negative result, meaning I didn't have Alzheimer's, because surely if I did, they would have somebody, my neurologist would be telling me and sort of walking me through it.
Yeah.
I opened up um, the test results and the chart, and much to my surprise, I really had quite bad Alzheimer's as far as they could tell. The y-axis on the graph, which is a measure of the tau, the concentration of tau, which is a bad protein
Mhm.
to have. The if you're 0 to 54 means you don't have it. 54 to 68 is borderline, and above 68 you do. And the chart goes to 150,
Mhm.
stops. I was 159,
Wow.
off the chart.
Yeah.
So that was incredibly upsetting. And, I was absolutely stunned. It was a Friday afternoon. I didn't have any recourse to talking to the
Mhm.
doctors quickly. And so my reactions were depression, fear, anxiety, a feeling of helplessness, um, and no one to talk to over the weekend. And the fact that I was going to lose my mind was probably the worst thing.
Yeah.
It was about the worst thing imaginable. In terms of how it changed over time, that's really very interesting, because for the first month or so, I was a basket case.
Mm.
And then I awoke one day. I really had this unexpected epiphany. I wasn't looking for it. It just came to me
Mhm.
that I had a new purpose in life. And that
Yeah.
purpose was to help end Alzheimer's and other dementias, help remove the stigma around it, and be of assistance to others dealing with the disease. Um, and as a result of that, my depression, my anxiety, my fear has disappeared, and I've become very involved in doing exactly that. I also have made a big decision, and that one is one I recommend to everybody, and that's to live with optimism and hope. There's good research out there that it helps slow the progression of disease.
Mm.
Uh, and if I was fine for 5 years, what if I remained depressed and 5 years later um, I was still fine, but I'd spent 5 years being depressed when I could have enjoyed those 5 years. So I said, no, no matter what, you should always be optimistic, and it just makes sense.
So you did get this diagnosis early on. What opportunities has that afforded you?
Well, I really recommend that. I mean, if people start having doubts about whether or not they have Alzheimer's, I mean, I think it really pays to have it looked at early, because, first of all, if you do have it, all the treatments and everything is being done now, the earlier you're aware of it, the more effective the treatment is. So that's really critical. But it also gives you a chance to get your affairs in order, and that's something we should all be doing it anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the time we wait. But I'm 81, and it's really, even if I didn't have Alzheimer's, it's really time for me to get everything in shape. This also is living in the present. It's really helped me, which is a wonderful thing. I tend to get lost in ideas and thinking and worrying or whatever. And when you know that you only have a certain amount of time and that you may not have any more time, then it makes living, right here today, right this moment, like right here when we're talking right now, just to be here and
Yeah.
enjoy that moment.
Yeah.
So, so I try to do that.
Well, you have such an inspiring story and life, Dan. So it's been great to talk to you. And this is sort of what I want to end on. I want you to tell other people what it's like to live with Alzheimer's. What do you want people to know about what it's like to live with Alzheimer's?
I want people to feel open. And that's why I have a business card that says I'm an advocate, and I give it to a lot of people. And it says in the middle of it, it says, my name is Daniel B. Hogan. And then, the fact that I'm, involved in the Alzheimer's Association. And then it says, so far as I can remember, ... so far as I can remember, to be humorous about it and to indicate that, look, you can just talk to me as a regular person. I'm not shy. I won't be offended by
Yeah.
questions. In fact, I'll welcome them. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and no need to say you're sorry. Everybody always says you're sorry, but I will tell you, because it's my purpose in life.
Yeah.
I'm not I'm a pretty happy camper. And the people I've been involved with have been absolutely wonderful. So
Yeah. Well, and that's great, normalizing it so people do feel comfortable asking questions, and maybe, they'll interact with somebody else eventually with Alzheimer's or dementia. So that's really important. So, Dan, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story and your life with us today. Thank you so much. Back to
yeah.
you, Sandra.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Dan. Dan, your shared experience is truly inspiring, and we certainly appreciate it. Finally, Nicole, what message would you like to share with someone who has just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's?
So I would say, as you just saw in this interview with Dan Hogan, that Alzheimer's disease does not need to define you. You're still the person that you are, even if you have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. You still have the right and the ability to live a vibrant life. I would say it's okay to be overwhelmed, though. This is a tough diagnosis to have, and it takes a little while to come to terms with that. And I would urge people to reach out to your family and friends, share with them, what's going on with you, and be specific about how they can support you and what you would like to continue to be able to do. And I hope that you'll reach out to the Alzheimer's Association with your questions, with your needs for support, and hopefully also looking for opportunities to get involved with the cause and hopefully contribute to our mission of a world without Alzheimer's and other dementia.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. And I also want to extend our heartfelt thanks to the Alzheimer's Association for all that you do and the essential services and resources that you provide to those living with Alzheimer's and related dementia. Alzheimer's is a journey that no one should have to walk alone. Whether you're someone living with dementia, a caregiver, or a friend offering support, remember that knowledge, connection, and compassion make a difference. If today's conversation resonates with you, reach out, ask questions, call the Alzheimer's Association, and lean on the support available. As we mark Alzheimer's Awareness Month, let's commit to reducing stigma, advocating for early detection, and most importantly, ensuring that those affected always feel seen, valued, and supported. I'm Sandra Harris, and this is Connect. Visit us at endlonelinessma.com to watch previous episodes, learn about the Coalition to Build Community and End Loneliness, and discover ways you can join the movement to help alleviate loneliness and promote healthy aging in Massachusetts.